Hey guys, and welcome to today's episode of the Wolf Digest. I'm your host, Amaros Stanin.
And I'm your co-host, Terkanil. Today we have a gaming-related topic focusing around, well, I guess you could say, kind of all things Bethesda. And there's quite a bit we can cover in this. So, we've got a guest.
We are introducing Eclipsewolf.
Hello, everyone.
He has a pretty extensive background in Bethesda-type games. A very big fan of Elder Scrolls. Heck, why don't you kind of give us a rundown of your background with Bethesda games so we know where we're standing?
I'm a bit of a latecomer to the Bethesda studio games. I started in with the Elder Scrolls V, was given to me as a Christmas present, and Skyrim absorbed my life for a very long time. I have well over 300 hours put into it.
I think anyone that got Skyrim for Christmas probably lost a month of their life.
Guilty.
I dabbled in modding it to go back and do replays, experience modded content for extended storylines. I played a little bit of Oblivion. I'm looking out for the Skyblivion mods to maybe eventually come out to play that with the Skyrim engine.
I take it you're a fan of the high-res content then, like the 4K pack and things like that? Have a little harder time with the low-res stuff?
Yeah, I do enjoy pretty graphics. Not to say I can't play games with lower graphics, but it does add to my experience when it is a lot easier to get involved in the story when everything looks good. And yeah, I've dabbled in some Fallout. I didn't quite get into it as much as the Elder Scrolls, but and a little bit of Doom and some Dishonored are really my biggest Bethesda game related things.
Well, of all of the past games in Bethesda's repertoire, which ones do you think were positives?
I would say Elder Scrolls Skyrim obviously was one of the big ones. I mean, it was extremely popular when it came out. Many people have many hours of gameplay and the massive amount of mods that the community has put out for it to keep it progressing long after Bethesda has ceased providing DLC content for it. They've come out on multiple platforms and eventually released the special edition. I would say that's probably one of their biggest and proudest games under their umbrella.
Well, I know Elder Scrolls was pretty popular before, especially with Oblivion, but yeah, I think you're right. The Skyrim, Elder Scrolls V just took it to an all-new level. I mean, it became a household name practically. If you were a gamer, you knew about Elder Scrolls with that. Whereas that,
well, when it comes to Skyrim, if you actually go and look at some of the reviews on it, there was actually at least one I remember reading that said perhaps the game is too good, and the reason that it was stating that is because it can suck up so much time while you're trying to do everything that can be done in that game that you can literally forget about any other game on the market.
Oh yeah,
because I mean, between regular Skyrim and the special edition, I have over 400 hours.
Yeah,
so
I think it definitely eclipsed a lot of games at the time. A lot of people were dedicating hours and hours to Elder Scrolls, where they weren't really dedicating that to some of the other AAA games of the time.
Yeah, it definitely took over, and I think if I remember correctly, it was Game of the Year for that year.
Yep.
Oh yeah, easy. And then they came out with the 4K texture packs. It just made what was already a very beautiful game even better.
The sad part is, though, the mods still triumph in that category, and there's still many more additions that you can throw onto it to make it even better than their special edition that they.
Well, that's one of the nice things about the Bethesda games is they're all generally highly moddable, at least for the single player games. I should say the main games instead, just to put it that way, because Morrowind was one of the early ones that were doing that a lot. There's tons of those. Oblivion has a whole bunch as well, and I've personally played with quite a few. Some of them again grabbing functionality from Morrowind and bringing it forward to Oblivion. There's Skyrim mods will bring forward stuff from Morrowind and or Oblivion. Then you got things like Sky Oblivion, as was mentioned, and so on.
Well, the modder that made a mod for Elder Scrolls V that did it as kind of I wouldn't call it a love letter to Bethesda. It was more of a job application resume for Bethesda. His goal in life was to work for Bethesda, and so he made this mod that added an entire continent, wasn't it? And
at least a very large zone.
Yeah, it added like another third onto the game, and he did a magnificent job, and even got some voice actor friends of not real voice actors, obviously, but friends that played voices for the different quests to actually provide voice content. And he did a huge project and coordinate all of it just to show his ability to Bethesda to see if he could get hired. And they did end up hiring him.
Yep. Now, along with Bethesda, and this will come up a little later tonight, is you can't have a Bethesda game without the bugs. And Skyrim definitely, for as good as it was, still had its fair share of bugs. I remember many times running to find an NPC that wasn't there, or invisible dragons. And I've got at least probably a list of 10 or 15 quests I ended up having to console complete, because you would progress a quest somewhere else which would affect an area, and then the NPC that you had to interact with would be gone, and you couldn't complete the quest.
And with the monolithic size of these games nowadays, I think long gone are the days of the Nintendo and SNES console games where they could fully get a game that's bug free for the most part out to customers before launch day. But whereas nowadays it's just not the case. These games are so huge, have so many moving parts, that if they could do it, that means the game isn't complex enough, I think.
Well, I mean, just to go off track for just a second, but still be related. If you go to one of the other more recent Game of the Year editions, Breath of the Wild from Nintendo for Legend of Zelda, that thing out of the gate was pretty solid. I think I only had it crash once, and that was the worst bug I ever saw.
Yeah. And
I didn't lose any progress. That's the difference. Whereas, like, with Bethesda games, there's the few that Eclipse mentioned for bugs, whereas some of the most notable are the game save corruptions.
Oh.
And you most commonly will see that on console, but I have personally encountered that on PC with Fallout 4. So that is one of the most infamous problems that have existed in any Bethesda game that I've ever played, and that's going well back to Morrowind. So we're talking early 2000s.
Yeah, and it's one thing to have a bug that causes the game to crash, but it's something else entirely to have all of your game save data just gone and you have to start over. That's a really bad feeling. That's something that you shouldn't have to be backing up your game folder every 3 hours just to not lose progress.
I think on my Fallout 4 playthrough, I ended up losing about 8 hours of play.
Although, as an aside, I think everyone should back up their game folder on a regular basis. Not the actual game folder, but their save folder. It's always a good habit.
Never know.
Hey, I did it all the time with Diablo 2. It was the best and only way to duplicate items on the open Battle.net servers. You just log in with a game, drop all your crap, and then go and overwrite your save file. But hey, open Battle.net, what can you say?
But when you also go and look at some of the other things that we've had, then there's, as much as, like current times, sort of current with, Skyrim going a little bit back or a little bit forward. If we go into like the Fallout universe, we have Fallout 3 and New Vegas, which were essentially the same engine based on the engine used for Oblivion. Fallout 4 was based on the engine for Skyrim. So many of the bugs that existed in the Elder Scrolls games could be found in the Fallout games.
Yep.
Surprise. And so we ended up having other problems there. But each game, while they still did very well with reviews and overall play, some had more love than others.
I mean, and taking a little break from those, it's not to say that all of Bethesda's games have bugs. I mean, games such as Doom and Prey and Dishonored came out with very few that I'm aware of,
Doom.
and had a very good following. And like Doom in particular, there was a lot of hesitation there, if I remember correctly, because people were unsure whether the biggest thing about it was whether or not it was going to live up to or surpass its originals that were very well beloved.
Well, part of that comes from the fact that if you look at Doom 3, it was
Yeah.
And I played the crap out of that one myself. So when the re-release of Doom came out, Doom 4/Doom 2016, that was a case of, is this actually going to be any good, or is it going to be another Doom 3?
Well, I know when Doom came out, I had my own reservations. I actually wasn't an early adopter. I didn't buy it on release day. I didn't pre-order it. I wanted to,
back in the day.
Yeah, I wanted to wait to see. I'm not talking way back Doom. I'm talking the new one. I wanted to see how it came out, and so I actually waited for you, Terkanil, to actually buy it first. And you played
what?
You played the crap out of it. It's like, this is so awesome.
Well, I got the collector's edition because I was at least, highly optimistic about it. It was from what I'd seen so far from preview information. So I've got a Revenant statue sitting here.
Yeah. And so, you started playing it. I watched over your shoulder a few times and it looked fun. So I ended up getting it. And that was a marvelous first-person shooter. I enjoyed the crap out of that game. I mean, the sheer fact that they made it so you could basically reach out, grab a demon, punch the crap out of him, and have him explode into not just an explosion, but it drops ammo and health. I mean, it became the thing to do to make sure you're always topped off with stuff. And I thought that was a marvelous mechanic that made the game even more fun. Because we all remember running around in like Quake or Doom and having like 3 ammo left. You're at less than a quarter health and you're just sneaking around corners hoping that you don't get shot in the face.
Well, for my case, it was a matter of memorizing literally where everything was.
And backtracing, right?
It's like, okay, we're going to leave that there because I might need that.
Yeah, and so you remember, I left 3 health packs and a stim over here, and then I got these shotgun shells back there and these rifle shells over here. And so when you start to run low, you run back and get them. Yeah.
And it's a little bit the same in the newer Doom, but
a lot less necessary.
Yeah, since you're still doing the good old run and gun, and they actually amplified that. They want you to run and gun. There have been times in that when I was playing that where I'd get into like arena areas and I was basically choosing an area and just running. And I would not stop for the next 10 minutes until everything was dead.
Yeah, and I enjoyed let's just say the room right at the beginning of the game, where you get locked in with a bunch of those 4-legged demons that crawl up and down the walls. That was a fun room because you get locked into it and all of a sudden you start just getting onslaughted and you have to just duck and cover, shoot and move. And that was a very good introduction to the game. It was a very good lead into what you would expect through most of the game. And I wasn't disappointed. That was a very well done game.
And that's the other thing about it is that while there was a story, Doom was never known for story. So the story was light and was just there to keep you going, which is kind of what, the idea when the original Doom was. So it was just, it was just sort of like frosting. Like, we didn't really care about it because we were too busy blowing everything up.
Yeah, when I'm playing a spray and pray first person, I could care less about the story per se. I mean, there's games that are more like Borderlands, which do have a little bit of a story, and something that's driving you forward. But I kind of enjoy those spray and pray kind of games. They're just kind of fun to me, just like a Diablo mashing game.
I'm on the flip side of that. I'm not so much the shooters. I enjoy the storyline, which is where games like Dishonored come in. Not necessarily have to run around gunning everything down with the options of doing stealth and following along a good story.
Well,
Bethesda's kicked
there's
out quite a few good stories in their gaming
for
history.
this for Dishonored, isn't there challenges where you can play the entire game without killing one person?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's definitely the flip side where you focus entirely on the story, and Bethesda does not disappoint in that regard either.
Yep. My personal favorite is I tend to be more stealthy, sneaky, hide in stuff, kill only when you have to.
Also guilty.
And I mean, even in Elder Scrolls and Fallout, I play in a similar manner. You know, if I can sneak around and get a good headshot in and not have to go in guns blazing, you know, that's how I tend to enjoy playing. And you can do that in both those games as well.
And I think the flexibility in the play style definitely something that helps bring in people into these games.
And it's these games that have given Bethesda a very solid footing with a fan base. You know, Fallout 3 and New Vegas in particular were very well received. And then when 4 came out, things started to get just a little bit rocky. Again, as Terkanil mentioned, it used the same engine as Skyrim and thus came out with bugs and some things that should have been in like a first person or a first point of view slider, you know, the FOV sliders that so you can adjust. I admit when I first started playing it, my head was kind of swimming until I had to go in and modify files to get that set up properly.
And one of the other things I remember back when Fallout 4 wasn't, shown off was, on one hand, people were hesitant about it, but they kind of liked it, which was, building a settlement. Seemed kind of fun, go build a base. Then it came out. It was okay for those who like to be really creative. It, provided something extra to do, but it was very superfluous, really. And over time, people got a little bit annoyed by it. So, I mean, on one hand, it gave you a lot to do. On the other, having to collect to do everything to keep all your settlements running. Well, that kind of caused a little bit of, meme action.
Well, plus your NPC that was constantly telling you that a settlement needs your help and to go do this quest. There are a few memes that started coming out of Fallout 4, and along those same lines as well. The graphics kind of started falling behind as compared to some of the other games coming out of its time. I know there's been a lot of debate going around whether they should be updating their engine. And recent posts from the company have stated that they tweak things and they've got some improvements to some things, but the base is basically going to be remaining the same for some of their future titles. And so a lot of backlash has come out over that. Other people are saying, though, it isn't the engine that's the problem, it's the time management or potential programming guidelines, or even just like Bethesda's ambition. Because obviously, modders have been able to make the game significantly better. And things that you would think would have been able to be done by the company.
One thing
Even when
we've,
I mean, there's been modders that have significantly improved the graphics in Fallout 4. Anything from doing better environment, feel, Luma, that kind of stuff, or improving the textures. And there's been a significant amount of modding community help in making Fallout 4 a very, very modern looking game. And
Yeah.
I almost consider those mods a necessity. When you install the game, go and get those favorite top 10 mods for Fallout 4 kind of listicles and install them.
including their unofficial patch note type of mods. Again, with the engine, you're still running into the same kind of bugs and glitches and things.
Or new ones.
This kind of, or new ones. This kind of segues our way into what's currently out there of
speaking of new ones.
The biggest controversy currently is the Fallout 76 that was announced and released. Did not go over so well.
Where did my still wrap package go? I think it's around here someplace. I lost my Fallout 76. It's that important to tell you.
I mean, when Pete Hines came out, I think it was E3, and they, people are, is it going to be an Elder Scrolls thing they're going to announce? Is it going to be Fallout? And came out and announced the Fallout game that was going to be because everybody has been begging for Fallout or Elder Scrolls to have some type of multiplayer version made, and this was supposed to be the answer to that. You're going to be in a world where it's a survival game and people are going to be able to help or hinder, and you get to explore the world and be part of the group that forms the story.
Well,
and
I think when people were asking for multiplayer, especially of Elder Scrolls, they weren't asking for an Elder Scrolls Online kind of MMO thing. I think they were asking for a Borderlands cooperative 4-player Skyrim. I think that's what they were trying to hint towards.
Oh, I know. That's what they were hinting towards, but this is what we got. this Fallout 76
Ask for
game.
diamonds and you get a chamber pot. Yeah.
And Pete Hines came out on that stage and hyping it up and making promises and even tossing out a joke here about how he's heard that their games can be buggy and that this game will just work. I believe was the exact quotes he used up on stage.
I wonder if Apple's going to sue him for stealing their slogan.
Possibly. I mean, and then they had their beta, and
actually that was Todd Howard.
Todd Howard.
Yeah, it was Todd Howard who was up on stage.
My apologies. Todd Howard.
Sorry, Pete Hines.
Hopefully I got the right developer with the right company, though. Hines is with Bethesda. Okay, good. Wrong person, same company. It's been a while since E3 was up on stage. But yeah, I mean, the beta came out and people were all super excited, and then there was backlash that decided to jump in.
Well, in the beta, it was very lackluster from the early stuff I saw from those who had gone in and played it. They were hesitant extremely about it. But they also started seeing bugs, and then they started seeing more bugs.
And then they started realizing that the whole you are the NPC, or the NPCs in the world or other players, meant that questing was not so great and rather lackluster. And it's a bunch of videos started coming out of people saying, probably don't buy this game. I know a couple of prominent YouTubers who actually canceled their pre-orders of the game because of how the beta was looking. And it wasn't a true beta, it was a play test because it didn't last very long before it was going live.
Yeah.
And a lot of the reviews that have been out so far have been, I think, 50% was a very high mark. Averages were down in the, so to speak, 20% range. So,
I mean, if there's a game out there that kind of signifies the not pre-order thing, it should probably be Fallout 76 for at least this year. I mean, SimCity was a really good example of why you should never pre-order, but the gaming industry just keeps doing it over and over and over again. All these games that are AAA titles, or should be, and they get pre-orders for them, and then they just fumble. They really.
Well, The problem is like we talked about previous, is that Bethesda had such a fan base that had trust in them because they have produced such fairly good quality games. You know, the bugs are obvious within the Fallout and the Elder Scrolls series, but they weren't. They didn't, do a significant amount of damage to the ratings of it, and so they play on that, and everybody's going to jump on it because of the Fallout fanboys, the Bethesda fanboys are going to take at least some trust in Bethesda that they're going to get what they said they were going to get at E3 when it was announced.
You think that 76 could have been maybe Bethesda's attempt to do a money grab, like these free-to-play games out there with loot crates and things like that, wanting to get in on that action?
Yeah, I think there's some things that hint at that. We can talk about a little later. He did come out on stage, I believe, and said that there wouldn't be loot crates, there wouldn't be, there would still be microtransactions, but they would be cosmetic, which is fairly common nowadays to see in games. And I don't think, as much as people don't like that kind of stuff, I don't think it wasn't going to be as big of a deal until things started coming into play. And that came on a little later. The biggest things that people were getting in on with Bethesda about were that, like PC version when it released, a lot of people couldn't even play the game. They couldn't uninstall the beta. There was a massive day one patch. Things did not start out so good, and that's what grabbed people first. Was something's not right here with this game. And then they started getting into it a little more. I mentioned the lack of NPCs, made questing kind of meh. The nuke codes were not random and were posted on the internet, and so people were just shooting off nukes and not having to go do all the questing or whatever to get those codes because somebody already found them and posted them.
Let's go to Reddit. We need to nuke out the things.
So they like hard coded the codes for the quests. And so
yeah,
you
they
just go and follow an online guide with the codes.
Oh, it's even less than that. Imagine, if you could. Let's look at this. We play World of Warcraft. We have our weekly quests.
Yeah.
Imagine if your weekly quest, you could skip doing the actual quest and just go to a certain point and go, I'm done.
Here's a code.
That's basically how it ended up playing out, is that instead of having to go and track down all the pieces necessary, since it's a weekly and universal code, you go out to Reddit, you grab the code, you go and fire it off. That's it.
Yeah, they should have had a code that got salted with your character's ID number or something, and then that was your code to finish the quest or something like that.
Well, the idea is to have you and others you're working with be able to pull it together, but
so everyone could use the same discovered code.
Unfortunately, since it was there wasn't a whole lot of breakout code pieces, it made it very generic.
Yeah, and again, this is rocky ground starting the game off of. You got the bugs, you got the weird codes, you've got game-breaking bugs where people's damage was broken. And so people started looking at this going, are you sure this is ready for a full AAA full price release? And but people are going to buy it. They're Bethesda fans, and I assume people who did and started seeing these things were going to assume that Bethesda's eventually going to patch it. So that kind of started. People still had their Reddits out there of things going wrong with it, all the bugs and stuff. But Bethesda was not very smart. And the next thing that came into play was the people started getting their Power Armor editions.
Oh, yeah.
And that contained their their helmet. It contained a couple other nifty items, and it was supposed to contain a canvas bag. And what people who got their editions pulled out of their box was not what was advertised. So that became the next big thing that people got on was, where's my canvas bag? They literally stated on the advertisement that this was a canvas bag. Now, there's all the legal jargon out there of things subject to change, which they were probably hoping to fall under that umbrella. But
unfortunately, that information, they never updated anything prior to launch, so it was still being advertised everywhere as canvas bag.
Yeah, they didn't update it. They didn't inform their player base.
And I'm not sure if you can legally have an advertisement for, this, like a canvas bag, and then have it in fine print subject to change, and you may not get it when the game actually launched. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can do that.
That's where a couple lawsuits were coming in.
Yeah, it would be like having a product of, I don't know, a card game and advertising, oh, it comes with a complete deck, and then actually just shipping one card saying, oh, sorry, it changed at the last moment.
Yeah, I mean, and customers were obviously bewildered and concerned about this because they paid, I think it was like $200 for that edition.
Yeah.
And so they were contacting the customer service, and the responses that they were getting back from that were ridiculous. There was claims that that's how it was shipped, that nothing was going to be done about it. There was claims that they ran out of material or that the cost was too high, and so they decided to change this.
Well, and to be fair, I have been on the customer service side before, and I can see where they may just be making up something to tell this one person, kind of thing, to get them satisfied or off the phone or who knows what. Yeah, I think the downfall was Bethesda not giving their customer service a line from their legal department even to tell customers to make their front uniform.
Well, on top of that, Bethesda didn't address this for a long time. People are going, well, what's the deal with this? Are we going to have anything done about this? Bethesda was quiet. And so that ran on for quite a while, and the stink became high enough. And it was kind of sad to see that people out there were also blaming the people, or basically telling those who got it that they should just be happy that they got that, and they were brushing them off. There were people out there that were saying this isn't a big deal. And
the last thing you want to do is slight your extreme customer base that's willing to pay $200 pre-order for a game, right?
Yeah, well, even I was looking on Facebook on some of these posts about the that were popping up on my newsfeed, and the comments down there were like, well, why are you guys complaining? It's just a bag, why are you, this, that, and the other thing. And it's sad that people had to fight through that. And what's even more sad is when Bethesda finally came through and decided to speak on the matter, that at first all they offered was like 500 of their little game currency for their store. 500 of it, the atoms,
the pop caps or whatever. The atoms.
They guys call it atoms.
Yeah.
So basically $5.
Yeah, which was $5 worth of store credit. To add insult to injury, that $5 of credit was not even worth it enough to buy a digital canvas backpack.
Yeah.
Let me just point out the fact here that some of the items they have out there for Fallout 76, the cosmetic things, they cost, I think one of the cheaper ones, like for example, a paint for power armor was like $15.
$15 to change the color of your
for a
power
skin.
Armor?
For a skin.
So yeah, I mean, $5 can't even get you a digital copy of the bag. It can't even get you a full outfit. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And then that went quiet for a little while. People are still going, there were actually media personalities out there saying, don't take their offer because that will satisfy them enough. They won't do anything about it. And so that went on for a little while, and then people started posting pictures. They had Bethesda had a social media personalities get together where they came and visited the studio, and they were given a little goodie bag. Well, that goodie bag was a nice canvas backpack. So that started making the rounds, and so people are going, well, you obviously have materials. You can make these canvas backpacks. Sure, it's going to be a lot easier to shell out a material for 500 of those backpacks as opposed to the however many pre-order special power armor editions people bought. But that spurred more outrage over it. And proof that you can make a company listen to you. They finally came out of this and said, we will be making the canvas bags and we will be getting them to our people, which was good. It just sucks that it took them so long to get to that point.
But there was still a problem with that. A bug on their website. You heard about that, right, Eclipse?
I've heard of many bugs.
This one in particular regarding their support website.
Oh yeah, they had the big security leak.
Yeah, they doxed their own client. Their people, going in for support. So you had home addresses, type of payment, and so on in support tickets that were available and open to anyone who had access to that system.
And somebody did. They posted on Reddit and said, "Hey, look, I've got access to these." And then in a joking manner, they're like, "Anybody want me to close out their ticket?" And then Bethesda played it down as a small breach or whatever. Like they tried to brush it under the rug a little bit, that it wasn't as serious as it really was. And is a lot of this is, I think, we're stemming, people believe, from Bethesda. Instead of using like Steam's client for things, they were using it's on their own Steam, or it's on their own Bethesda client. Because I don't think you can get Fallout 7. Yeah, launcher. You can't get Fallout
76 is only on the Bethesda launcher.
Yeah, so something obviously, again, Bethesda bugs, is working its way into other areas.
Well, that is kind of the thing of a lot of these companies are moving to their own launchers, their own stores. You got the Discord one, you got Epic, Blizzard, Steam, and they're doing it to try to reclaim that 30% tax almost that a lot of these distribution methods are taking. And
probably also makes it a little easier for them to do their like digital store and cosmetic items.
Possibly. I know that some stores like the iPhone App Store, it don't allow in-game purchases to be made outside of the Apple's pay structure, because they still want that 30% cut of even in-app purchases. So they'll actually deny games that have in-app purchases that are handled independent of the Apple Store. And I wouldn't be surprised to see other of these distributors having the same restrictions.
And Terkanil, like Terkanil mentioned before, speaking of the store items, their costs for a lot of these things is ridiculous. I mean, in fact, this game has dropped in price in record time. No AAA game in history has gone down in sales. They slashed it to 50. They slashed, I think it's only like $20 now to buy. I mean, within a couple of months, this never happens. And instead of working with things, they're starting to throw more priced stuff on their store. to gouge money out of people. There was a Santa outfit for $20 flippin' dollars on there, which is ridiculous. That amount of money is about what it costs to buy a DLC for The Witcher
Yeah.
3.
And that's way more enjoyable than having a Santa outfit.
Exactly. So they're dropping the price of the game to lure people in, and then they're chucking microtransactions at them.
And these really are not, and these are not cheap items. I mean, as an example of something you can find out there, there's apparently a pair of glasses you can get on their store that's that says 2076. That's what the glasses look like, and the circular of the O and the 6 are the actual glasses. That's 760 atoms.
And
So-
atoms aren't gained at a reasonable rate in game 2, from what I understand. It would take many, many, many hours of gameplay to even buy the lower end items from the shop. So it's playing out like mobile apps, where you are basically pigeonholed into, if you want to progress, you have to lay down real world money. You can't just do it with in-game.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people could agree that 10 hours of their time grinding is worth $5 or $10 to them.
But in Fallout 76, that wouldn't equate to $10 from what I understand. Like, we're talking hours and hours of grinding to be able to get $3 per instance.
Yeah, and that's where that grinding better be something that's enjoyable to do, something that you elect to do and get rewarded for, as opposed to, kill 17,000 of these things to grind out this repeatable quest to finally get a number of atoms that you buy this item.
Exactly. And it sucks that we're seeing that in games nowadays. It's so prevalent, and people are starting to really backtrack on wanting to get games because of this feature, this cash shop that people are getting into, and they're like, oh, it's only cosmetic. But the problem is that people, their gameplay, a lot of them, to enjoy it, they want to be unique, especially in a game that is with many people. You're going to be around others. You want to make your character look unique, and the only way you're going to be able to do that is cosmetics, which are primarily bought through their in-game shop. And
that makes it start to sound like, why did they put a price on this game to begin with? Why wasn't it released as a free-to-play? Like any of the other games that have these similar mechanics that are just reliant on a shop to do a lot of things.
Exactly. And, that went on for a while. People kind of started dying down. Their anger had gotten out. Most recently, though, there's been updates to the files that have started talking about these things called lunchboxes. And there is a reference to these lunchboxes in game, but where it was concerning was there was a file tag on it that suggested that it would be brought to the in-game shop. So we would be getting loot boxes with this game, after they specifically said that this game would not contain loot boxes.
But they're not loot boxes, they're lunch boxes.
Lunch boxes. On top of that, these loot boxes would be like include XP boosts and increased bag space, which really sucks because.
Well, just to point out, there's also some talk that it was possible that it could have been actually being used for the card system that you use to get skills from.
Yeah, when people originally looked at the card system, their perk cards, they were really suspicious that that might wind up being in the store as a loot box. Just how they work and how they're animated and everything was prime for being put into a store as a loot box. I think it was wise that they didn't, The other part of this with the loot box suggestion is that perk cards might eventually make their way to the cash shop, which would really suck. Along with, like I was mentioning, this loot box would potentially contain pay to win features, your experience boosters, your increased bag space. This is important because they, without telling people, went and nerfed experience gains. And bag space is atrocious in the game that requires a lot of crafting for things. People are not having the bag space to do that.
Yeah, I mean the lunch boxes are starting to sound a little bit more like the Ingrams in Destiny 2 or the llamas in Fortnite, where you can buy them with in-game stuff, or you can buy them from a store, but they give you these perks in the game, and they use it as a general rewards chest.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time. I mean, if you go back and look at their little mobile game, Fallout Shelter, lunchboxes were the loot boxes in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's an alternative theory out there, because keep in mind this was data mined and speculation, that there's an alternative theory that it could be a potential reward added to the holiday events that they're planning to implement in the game. And as an example, in Elder Scrolls Online right now, there's the Winter Festival going on, and you get a loot box as a reward for doing a daily quest. I don't think that would be as bad. One thing, though, kind of shying away from that theory is there's been data mined pictures of loot box bundles of like 1, 3, and 5, which you wouldn't necessarily see in a holiday event, but something that might arrive on a store.
Yeah. One fun thing to mention with it, you mentioned data mining and how this was found via data mining. Did you hear about the Fortnite data miner that actually got a cease and desist from Epic?
I did not.
FNBR Leaks. He tweeted out a bunch of stuff that he had been data, but he was pretty much the go-to data miner for Fortnite, and he had game mod tools that he was selling, and that was the reason, the real reason for cease and desist. But it was just funny that a known data miner that was releasing stuff way early, it was essentially shut down by one of these companies, even with the roundabout way of getting him for promoting and advertising game mod tools.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of also interesting. Bethesda hasn't really spoken out about this current discovery.
Oh crap, they caught us.
Yeah, it makes you kind of wonder, are they, going to kick the game to free to play and implement a loot box system?
Well, to be fair, games have to make money somewhere.
But how they've been pushing it with the stores, it's expensive as all get out.
Yeah,
it's excessive, and it's
unreasonable.
And a lot of the times, these companies are trying to please the shareholder, not the gamer. But you look at games like The Witcher 3, God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2 are massively, massively successful. And Red Dead Redemption 2 online, yeah, it has loot boxes, but even a well-selling game, unless there is a vast increase in profits to the shareholder, is not a successful game.
Yeah, and that's kind of the sad thing, is I think there's a lot of people out there that would rather have a good mechanics system in the game. Like I feign to say Destiny 2 Ingrams are a good mechanic, but it's at least a better mechanic than not having anything whatsoever. But have something in game where the player can get rewarded for doing repeated content stuff, and just make a good AAA game and not rely on a store. to do anything in it and just have the game stand on its own. And I think people would be willing to even pay a slightly higher price for that kind of a thing, because that's the big thing we're contending with. Games nowadays, with the art that is involved and the level of detail that goes into the engines and things like that, they are having a hard time making a game that's profitable at $60 a pop.
Potentially. There has been, I mean, if you look at things like, I think it was Battlefront, the Star Wars game that came in with, or no, it was the Lord of the Rings based game that came in with the orcs being bought through crates and whatnot. I believe it was that game where they ended up taking, no, it was Battlefront. They took out the loot boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and they then went and turned around to shareholders and said this won't affect it. So it's a lot. I believe there is, and they won't release numbers either. No, they say, oh, we need this to sustain stuff, but they won't release the numbers to prove that they need in-game microtransactions to be able to sustain their games.
Well, I mean, if you just look at their shareholder reports and their quarterly reports, that should give you enough information, not about an individual, their industry as a whole, and see how profitable they are, as most companies are doing these microtransactions. A lot of them are reporting really high profit rate.
Greedy profit rates, I think, is more of the accurate term.
Greedy profit rates. It depends.
Well, the problem, in the end, what this all comes down to is that, especially because of how Fallout 76 is played out, people are becoming a bit more hesitant about how we're looking at Bethesda.
I
so
mean,
not only at its present, but also what could come out in the future.
I think a lot of this game's backlash would have been mitigated if, when they came out and announced it, they announced it as an early access title. I still think people would have pre-ordered with a reasonable amount, and they would have known that they were going to be getting a buggy experience, but that they were going to be able to give feedback to mold the game into what they wanted. Instead of getting a broken AAA title from a well-known company, they would have avoided their fallout from all of that, I think, if they had announced it as an early access and worked on it from there, because it was at best an early access.
And they would have had to actually respond to customer input. That's the big thing about early access, is it's driven by the player base. The developers should be listening to and responding to feedback on the new systems that they were intending to add as they add them, to see if it's received as well as they thought it would be. And if it's not, they should be willing to abandon it or change it.
Well, if we look at how that kind of effect can play out, then there's a couple of ways we can go. And if we keep in with the Bethesda theme here, then we can go up one level to their parent, ZeniMax.
Yeah.
In a game that all three of us have played, called Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah.
We all played that when it launched.
It was a rough launch.
Beta.
In beta.
Oh my glory.
Yeah.
I mean,
I pre-ordered Elder Scrolls Online. I did. I was looking for an alternative to World of Warcraft. I was wanting something different. I was willing to move on, and I actually got both Elder Scrolls Online and WildStar.
Yeah, because they were the competing titles of that time.
Yeah,
and Eclipse and I both got the collector's editions.
Yeah,
for that matter.
I
got another collector's edition for ESO upstairs, for that matter.
For the beta that we tested, the story was pretty good. There were broken quests, some things that should have made it in at launch. Some of the biggest complaints.
You know what the worst thing for me, since we're gonna talk complaints here, I'll just do mine. My biggest thing was when you would complete one of those caves, the mini dungeons, and you would get to the end and you had to just stand there camping the end guy to kill him before everyone else did.
Yeah, they're
And the bots. Oh my
big.
goodness, the bots.
Oh yes, it was a lot of botting.
I just recalled that because while I'm sitting there camping, I'm being hoarded by like 1,700 bots. Well, maybe not, but
yeah, their one server and their phasing was not. It was a little bit rocky. I mean, the biggest thing is with Elder Scrolls games. Obviously, you pick your class, you go and do what you want. This, when it launched, didn't have that. You picked your class and you were pigeonholed into DC, AD, or EP, Daggerfall Covenant, Ebonheart Pact, or Aldmeri Dominion. And then from there, you had a set of 5 zones, and you had to go from zone to zone, just like World of Warcraft, where, one zone you'd outlevel, you move on to the next zone, and so on and so forth.
yeah, and that's been kind of the staple with RPGs, though.
Yeah, but for people coming in, trying to rope in the Elder Scrolls fan base, that was a hesitation for people. The other hesitation was, which they did at launch. If you pre-ordered, you could pick your race and you could go with any faction. And then obviously later that became standard, but it was only a pre-order bonus. Anyone else who started into the game after launch would be stuck with whatever faction 3 races was in that faction. Classes and specs were broken. I remember as a stamina Nightblade, I couldn't even take on 2 regular mobs without dying half the time because my abilities weren't strong enough. It was a very weak spec. And I made it to Vet 7 before I burnt out trying to keep with that because that's how I wanted to play.
And here
and that's how they advertised it.
Dragon Knights did well. I did okay on my caster class. I forgot even what it was called, but in that rendition.
The sorcerers.
Yeah. I could at least do decent. So, but with all the bugs and the quest being absolutely, in some cases, utterly broken, I gave up.
I mean, the thing that really had me turned off, like I said, was the bots. Like the crafting system was all right. I mean, I would collect stuff as I ran around, but I didn't really feel like I was doing anything worthwhile because all of the bots that were just running around doing all of this auto farming and auto farming stuff off of the dungeon bosses and looting chests. It was just crazy.
Yeah, it's a common sight was literally walking through a zone and seeing a train of one class. All the characters look exactly the same. Like, literally, you could say like 17 characters all lined up, just running.
Yeah, just power leveling.
Yeah,
and they're following the exact path and everything.
Yeah, it was funny to watch them lag a little bit and skip around. You could tell they were all coming from the same box or same network or something.
Yeah, and you guys dropped out before you even hit vet level. I actually made it at a vet 7, and it was grindy. So once you finished your first zone, you got to go to the next faction zones, and you had to complete that. And it was 10 vet levels at the time. So 5 vet per zone, or per factions zones, and I made it up to 7 before I burnt out.
And you're saying we dropped at a good time.
Yeah, you probably dropped at a good time.
Because it definitely wasn't worth paying $15 a month for. Not when we had WoW to flip back to, or WildStar. I dropped out of Elder Scrolls and just started playing WildStar full time.
Yeah, and I stuck with it for a while. But yeah, with that $15 mandatory price tag attached to it on top of buying the game, yeah, eventually I dropped off as well. And at the time I dropped out, the guild features were still lacking. There was no guild stores, so trade was all in the zone chats. There were a lot of features that it did not have a good start, and a lot of people thought it was going to tank.
Well, I can go back on like the trading and say, talk about somewhere I've come from, because I'm an old school MMO player. I was playing EverQuest back in the day, and there was a couple of locations in EverQuest that became the primary trading hubs. As an example, one of the zones in the game was called Greater Fadark, and inside there was the Wood Elf city of Kelethin. And people who wanted to sell stuff would effectively go to Kelethin, and they would just sit there and just yell. So if you go into that zone, you had to turn off that channel, because all it was just shopping spam. So if you wanted to find something, you go and say, I'm trying to buy this. And as a result, Greater Fadark became known as Ife, if you get the connotation there.
Yeah, eBay.
And it was honestly horrible. It took them 1, 2, 3 expansions before they came up with something better, which was the Bazaar. And it was better.
An auction house?
Kind of. You go into the Bazaar, and how it would work is you would actually go there with your character, plant yourself down in a location somewhere in this zone, relatively small, and then you would say, here's the stuff, and then one of your bags has all the stuff you're trying to sell. And you say, here's, then you just point the GUI for the Bazaar at that bag, set the prices, and then you AFK.
Hey,
so if you get disconnected, well, you're no longer selling stuff.
Yeah. And
I mean,
Elder Scrolls kind of did something kind of like that, where you could buy a spot in some of these more common areas and have a vendor.
I think
so. Well,
that.
Yeah. So basically, ZeniMax was smart, and they didn't want to give up on their games, so they went through a massive overhaul. I came back just before this happened because I had been reading up on it. When I had left, they came out with Craglorn, which was the group zone, which I didn't get very much done in. I finished out vet up to vet 10. I had to grind to vet 14 by killing mobs because I couldn't do Craglorn. Nobody was doing Craglorn anymore, and I wasn't powerful enough to do the group stuff myself. But they were, I ground up to 14 because those who got to 14 were automatically given a jump into their new system, which was the champion point system. So when this revamp happened, ESO went free to play, which I think was smart. They left in the $15 sub so that you could have ESO Plus, which gave you crafting bags, experience boosts. It's improved now. Like, there's some things we can get off the Crown Store for free, and so.
Well, and you can buy X-Packs through the Crown Store too. You
can. That came in controversial, but later. But you can use them throughout champion points, your champion point system and everything. But the champion point system was really good because it gave you each of the trees for the Mundus stones, basically, and you could pick abilities within those trees. So every time you would level up, it gave a continual amount of gameplay. Even when you hit your max level of 50, it still allowed you to progress your character in fairly minimal, but obviously the more you add, the greater your ability is going to be. And I think it's up to max of 800 right now. And I'm still not there. Still working on it. But the champion point system went over pretty well. Obviously still some tweaking. It's kind of constantly going around with things. They improved questing and scaling, so you could go anywhere you want. You start your character. You could start in Aldmeri Dominion, even though you had a Daggerfall character, because all the zones scaled to your level. So go anywhere, do whatever you want, kind of thing, which was really good. They improved their guild features. They put in what you guys were talking about, a store. So they have certain spots around Tamriel where they have guild vendors, and you every week can purchase a guild vendor for that week. So there's, since you can have up to 5 guilds, there's guilds out there that are specifically for trading. I'm a officer in one of those types of guilds. So our guild is set up So we have a really good vendor at a really prominent location. The more prominent location you've got, the better traffic you get, the more sales you get, and the more money you make, which has kind of been nice. Given variety to the usual one auction house like in WoW.
Yeah.
Um,
I
a
mean, it
lot
is kind of
less.
nice to have everything in one spot, like the one
It
auction
is.
house in WoW, rather than having to go shop a bunch of stores.
Yeah, and there's some external websites you can use to help that. I mean, generally speaking, the prominent locations, you know, you're going to be able to find most everything you're looking for usually, and whatnot. It's a lot better than it was before. The trading in the zone chats has gone down significantly. It's still there for those who haven't joined trade guilds, because they don't have any other way of really getting money through item exchanges and whatnot. But
Yeah.
they continued to balance classes and specs. They added in different talent trees relating to their DLC packs, like the Dark Brotherhood and the Thieves Guild. They did bring in the Crown Store, which a lot of it is cosmetic. There is some ability to buy like crafting cooldowns for research and experience pots. Didn't go over quite so well, but I think people have just kind of come to accept it by this point. A lot of my biggest gripe with it was that all the cosmetics that look cool were on the Crown Store,
Yeah.
and not a whole lot that you could earn in game. A lot of the mounts and pets and whatnot. We're starting to see more in-game things. Events they recently had associated with the Somerset DLC where you could get a pet and a mount and a house by participating in going around and exploring the Somerset zone. Achievements were implemented, starting to get die rewards for doing things, toys, titles. Not so much the mounts. Like I said, a couple are starting to sneak in here or there. The Indrik being the most recent with in-game events, so allowing you to get that mount in-game. And then they also implemented a daily login reward system, which has been some of the months have included crown crates, which are their loot boxes. Not too happy about loot boxes, but they're there. You can, if you get duplicates or you don't want something, you can convert them into a gem. The gems allow you to collect enough to buy some of these things that are only in the loot crates.
Well, here's a question. What do you think makes the Crown Store for ESO less of an outrage than loot boxes and things for other games? What did they do right that other games are doing wrong?
Well, most of the Crown Store is you buy your crowns or you get crowns with your ESO subscription. So if you're subscribed to ESO Plus, you get, now they've upped it to I think 1,600 crowns or so.
Which is what, $16 worth of
Yeah,
crowns?
it was 15, so it was essentially $15 worth of crowns every month. They've upped it a little bit now. So you get those crowns and they have a fairly wide variety of things that you can buy, from houses to motifs to cosmetics, appearance things, and most of it is purchasable. You know what you're getting. They do rotate out for seasonal stuff, so obviously you're not going to be picking up a Halloween themed thing in the middle of July. You kind of have to wait till it comes around. Their loot box system is you can get tripods and food buffs and your experience boosters as well. Generally, the biggest complaint about that is they tend to have loot box specific mounts and pets that you can't buy with gems, although some of them have recently showed up. I just recently bought one that was, I thought was only available to be got through the loot box system. So I don't know if they'll continue to do that, occasionally sneaking in a this is a limited time offer if you want to get it with your gems instead of having to rely on the randomness of the loot box.
Well, one cool thing I know that they do is that occasionally they'll offer packs of crowns for half price, right?
They do, yeah. They'll have sales, half price. I haven't seen a half price in a while. It's like 30% off, I think, is the best I've seen recently. But yeah, when they were half off, definitely I'd buy a fair amount. And the other nice thing with their crowns is that you can buy their DLCs with them. This is one thing I think that has sustained them well, is that they set up a good schedule. They, at the beginning of the first quarter, they release a small DLC zone, so like the Dark Brotherhood zone. Recently, Murkmire is a smaller zone. And so they release a DLC zone. Then in the summer, they release their big expansion zone. So that's Morrowind, Somerset, that basically carries that year. That's its expansion for the year. And then they do a dungeon DLC. So they release 2 dungeons, unique dungeons with new mechanics. Eventually, they put in unique motifs, achievements, and other rewards for those. And then they finish out the year with another smaller DLC. Recently, as I mentioned before, Murkmire is this recent one that has come out. And those smaller DLCs and the dungeon DLC you can buy with your crowns. So for somebody who's been subscribing to ESO Plus for a long time and has a setup of crowns, they automatically get access to those DLCs, but they can use those crowns to buy them so that if they ever go off of ESL Plus, they will have forever access to those DLCs.
Yeah.
Housing was a big one that came into. There is an immense love for housing systems in games, and they've got small houses to great houses. It implements your crafting system. So you can craft items for your house. You can also find items in the world, collect recipes, tailor it to how you want your house to look.
And each house has a different number of items you can store in it max, right?
Yes, and then that's where
Decor
Plus
and that
comes.
kind of thing.
Yeah, and then ESO Plus comes in and gives you twice that amount essentially.
Yeah, so
So
the
what would have
biggest
been,
keep you can have, 800 items, whereas one of the smaller, cheaper locations may only be able to hold 200, right?
yeah, exactly. So they've done and put in a lot that has pushed them forward, and to a point where they outlasted WildStar. And at the beginning, there was people out there that had no hope for ESO. They were pretty sure WildStar was going to continue on, where ESO would fail. But it shows the difference in willing
Strategy.
to strategize, revamp things, get it back on track to where your customer
Yeah.
base is going to be happy and
Yeah.
persevere. And now they've come to a point where they're a decent option over the juggernaut World of Warcraft. It's it's never going to be quite WoW's level. They have the years and the fan base on top of that, but it's still up there as a decent alternative to World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Well, you have to, if you want to look at just, really quick on WoW, you can go back and look at, the thoughts of it before it even came out. When it was originally announced, in PC Gamer magazine, there was a blurb about World of Warcraft, and the very short version they put in there is World of Warcraft is basically Blizzard's ability to print money.
Yeah. And it has held true. I mean, they're still making money hand over fist with that game. And pretty much any of these MMOs that have popped up on the sides have all been, WoW killers kind of thing. Their whole goal in life was to become the next WoW. And
I think
WildStar was even ex WoW devs that it wanted to go in a different direction than they were allowed to at Blizzard.
And I think that was also a key difference between WildStar and ESO, because if I remember correctly, WildStar was definitely tackling the we're gonna crush WoW. This is old school attunement, things like that the old school players are gonna flock to. I don't remember ESO ever toting the we're gonna be a WoW killer title. They wanted to create an online where you could play with your friends an Elder Scrolls game. And I don't think they ever really tried to beat WoW. And I think that's part of the reason why they succeeded.
Yeah, they're giving a different experience. It's not necessarily a WoW experience. They're getting something that is more reminiscent of a Skyrim.
Yeah, I mean it's vastly different from Bethesda's, just how gameplay works, and obviously things that you're hampered with being a multiplayer game versus a single player game. One of the big things with WildStar that really put me off was it was too much like WoW, and I was looking for something different. And it was like, why should I go play WildStar when I have this character who's already way invested, and I can just continue progress there? And it didn't feel different enough for me. Whereas ESO did. It was a different graphic style, different type of gameplay.
Yeah, it was completely different. I mean, WildStar still had some of that more cartoony feel to it, a little bit more of the lightheartedness that some of has in it. I mean, there was a lot of really good Easter eggs in the game. One thing I do wish that WoW would pick up on is the housing thing. I immensely enjoyed the housing system that was in WildStar. I would join guilds of housing people that just were sharing their housing, so that you could go and run through this custom plot that they made and designed. And there was
awesome.
Yeah, I did some YouTube videos of just going through people's housing and showing their plot worlds, essentially. And it was amazing. There was some that were jumping puzzles that were super great. Some were mazes. Some were very beautiful and laid out very nice. Some were reminiscent of Mad Max. It was pretty fun. And I kind of wish that WoW would do that. They could make an entire profession out of just making things for your house.
The thing about it is the housing was actually discussed way back when with WoW.
Well, that's what that portal and Stormwind was for, right?
There was a hidden
behind
portal.
The locked gate over by the old
gate.
town.
There was one by Old Town. There was one yeah, it was by Old Town. It was in the canal area.
Yeah, that was where they were originally going to do player housing.
Yeah, but they changed. I mean, they never opened that up even between beta and launch. There was nothing anyone ever found in there or that looked anything like player housing. And while even while we found ways to get to stuff that we weren't supposed to, like back in beta, we found ways to get to early versions of what looked like Emerald Green and Outlands.
Oh yeah.
Someone figured out how to get to Admin Island. So we actually knew which direction things were. Admin Island was west of Teldrassil, for example.
Yeah.
Very west of Teldrassil.
Ultimately, I think what Elder Scrolls has done over what WoW currently is that they are providing a variety for people from the most casual to hardcore that like to raid, people that like crafting, the people like housing. They're trying to dip their fingers, not always perfect. There's definitely some things that need much improvement on and bugs that could use some fixing and whatnot, but they're trying to cater to all types of player base and do it fairly well. And I would like to see Bethesda eventually, like with Fallout 76, have a similar mindset where they're going to improve and make that game better than it currently is.
It's a long way, but just looking at ESO and what the direction ZeniMax took with it, I mean, they have the knowledge and ways to reach out to get help. I mean, Elder Scrolls is from Bethesda. Bethesda's under ZeniMax. I mean, they should have the ability to reach out and say, what can we do? How can we improve this? And do it in a timely fashion that people will give another chance. Will people give another chance? Possibly. That possibly comes from one, because overall, people still have some lingering trust about Bethesda, even if there have been missteps. Are they hesitant? You bet. But if we go back and look at other games that have had similar turnarounds, this can give us an idea of where what gamers can look at. I mean, if we go and look at like Final Fantasy 14, it re-released itself, turned itself around. Or look at one of the other ones that made a much bigger controversy, No Man's Sky.
Oh yeah,
that raised all kinds of problems, and over time they've patched it and added a lot of stuff, and the game has become far improved over what it was when it first launched.
Yeah, it's what it should have been when it first launched.
Right. So
I mean, Bethesda has a pretty solid past, and I think they will be able to call on that if they can sort out their present. Their present is currently way too rocky with all the fallout of Fallout and everything, all the missteps that they're taking. Unfortunately, in this day and age, with the please the shareholder and not the gamer first, I'm concerned that we will continue to see buggy releases. I'm concerned we're going to see more loot boxes or pay stores for even just cosmetic items.
Or Diablo Mobile.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, I mean,
we haven't even touched at Blades, but we're gonna leave that alone.
Yeah, I mean, Blades, it's going to be a mobile game. It's probably going to have similar features. I would like to hope that it's not slows you down to where you pretty much feel you have to buy the next step to progress. But again, I feel like that's the way things are going right now, and that's what people are going to look towards and say, okay, what are you putting in here? Where's the catch? What's this game going to have that I have to fork out more money for? What I would like to see is them to kind of return back to these past games, releasing single player, solid storyline games. I'd like to see them improving their engine, be it they revamp their current one or move on to something new that could maybe iron out some of the bugs that we've seen time and time again. I'd like to see them avoid going down the money grab route of loot boxes, and I'd like to see them open up on communication too. A lot of these issues that we went over are because they didn't address their consumer base. They didn't tell anybody that we're nerfing XP or you're not getting your canvas bag, all that. You're going to have backlash over it when people discover it, and it makes you look like you're hiding stuff. But I think as much as people will be mad if you come out and say it straight out, that it's going to be less than when people discover it on their own. It's what I'd like to see, but so far their track record is not heading down that path that I would like to see them go down. They're heading down the please the shareholder, kick out games as fast as they can in unpolished states, and not communicating with their customer base. So it'll be interesting to see from here on out where Bethesda is going to wind up next, because they've got Starfield coming out, and they've hinted at the Elder Scrolls 6, and I'm I was like super excited to see 6, but at this rate, I might not even pre-order when they start announcing that, because
6 is probably still a few years out.
oh, I know it's still a few years out. They've got time to improve themselves before then, but if they don't, it's gonna be a sit on it and see.
Well, my biggest thing that I would like to say and see from developers in general, even, is listening to your community. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, a game studio is a few hundred developers, and only a few of which have any real, like, large pull in what game direction they're going to go in, what systems they're going to include, things like that. And a few people or even a council around a table isn't going to have the ultimate method. They're not going to have the best of idea for every situation. And their community of gamers are going to be thousands, tens of thousands of players that have played a variety of games over their lifetime and know what they like to see in a game and can provide that feedback to the developer during an early access or a beta, and actually have a meaningful amount of input to even help contribute to what is missing from the game and be able to provide that real feedback. Not, some person just complaining or nitpicking, but actual quality feedback. If you go and read some of the forum postings on like WoW patches or on ESO, there is some really detailed responses that they put a lot of thought and research even into on how a system can be improved or replaced with something better that would provide a better rewarding experience for the player. And those are the systems I would like to see put into the game, not, just something that was voted for around a table or something that the lead developer thinks might be good in this game to make it different than this other game. Sometimes different isn't necessarily better.
Jumping in on that one really quick, I mean, let's go back and look at something we're also familiar with. I mean, since we've referenced Blizzard a lot, look at Diablo 3. The loot system that was put out in Diablo 3 with the expansion was actually community suggested. There was a giant forum post about how the loot system could be revamped.
Mm-hmm.
That revamp became Loot 2.0.
Yeah, and that was definitely a good system. It came out as the savior, really, for Diablo 3, to be able to run stuff and actually get a directed reward that might actually help, rather than grinding hours and hours.
So I think if people are continue to play 76, I think we'll end up seeing more community output on what would be the rather input on how the game could be, really improved. Because people are taking it apart already. There are people who have already given up. There's people who still have hope, and it's those people that are looking at how can this game be, improved so that people will want to actually, spend time in there, or even, in consideration, depending on how the Bethesda plays it, might even actually, pay for some of their add-on purchases.
Yeah, exactly.
Games can do it, but it's a matter of if the game itself doesn't draw you in, there's no real reason to pay money. I mean, let's go look at WoW, for example. There's a lot of stuff you can get in game. Like, for example, people just found out there's a hive mind mount that you can acquire and how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, glory. And then there's also the $25 Fox mount. People are buying that. Yep. That's the difference.
So the key is, though, that the developer has to listen to the player base. They have to be able to go through these posts, figure out what they are actually looking at, and if it would make sense in their circumstance. the crowdsourcing of game input is probably going to be the best source of information for them to weigh and progress forward. And if there's a demand for it, why not put it in? It might actually bring back play. But they have to listen to their player base because the gamers are the ones that pay them, not shareholders. That's just the short of it. And I think that's a good place to wrap. Thank you too for contributing and having this great discussion. I really hope that Bethesda sees this and actually it takes some of this to a meeting. That would be great. But thank you guys for watching as well. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, leave some comments if you want us to do more of these kind of focus digests. That would be something we're interested in. Give us some ideas on other companies or things that we could focus in on and just have a session about. But thanks, and we will see you in the next one.
Have a good one.